All right, good afternoon. I am Jo Reingold, the interviewer, and I'm here with Jo-Sandra Greenberg. Today is Thursday, January 13th, 2022. Hello there, good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Jo.
Okay, take us back a little bit, if you will, to whatever you know about your grandparents, your parents, whatever you think is applicable, and what you know about where and when they were born and where they grew up.
I only know a little bit about my maternal grandparents and very little bit about my father's parents. My mother's parents come from Romania. And the story is that my grandmother was a beautiful woman. At 16, was attracted to a Romanian soldier who was not Jewish. So she was married to a man quite a bit older than she. And they married and started having children every 2 years. And shortly after that, they came to America. He was an electrician. So everything I ever saw in my home that looked like a vase or a vase was turned into a lamp.
Great, wonderful.
But they had a name that was apparently longer perhaps, but it was shortened to Segal, S-E-G-A-L.
Okay. Where did they settle when they came here?
They came to New York and in the city.
And they stayed there for many, many years. That's basically where they settled.
Probably, I think, as the children, there were 6 children that survived, and the crossing must have been terrible, because when I found the whatever it is that you see where all the names are listed, my mother was 6, and she said that they came over in 1901, but they really came in 1906, and she said she didn't remember it. So it must have been a horrible thing for her to have to remember.
Oh, okay. And you said your other side you didn't know much about?
No, my father was 10 years older than mother, not 5, as he said. And he came from Bielorussia, where it is said that his side of the family were cantors, but he was a tailor. And they met because he was in Dallas taking clothes from various factories that had children's clothing, because that was his area of expertise. And he would sew on buttons or fix zippers and then go out and peddle them. That's how he was making his money. And mother was selling ladies' ready-to-wear at a store called The Leader in downtown Dallas.
I'm just curious, how did they settle on Dallas, Texas when they came over?
I don't know about my
here?
father.
No.
I don't know. Well, my mother had her best friend. Her name was Lillian, Jack and Lillian, and I'll think about the name in a minute. But they got married in New York, and I have pictures of them in bathing costumes back in the mid-teens. Mm-hmm. And my mother could not decide whether or not to divorce her first husband. So she got on a boat in New York and landed in Galveston and came to Dallas to visit Beth and, not Beth, Lil and Jack, her buddies. And so during the time she was here, her husband died of a ulcer. And so she and my half-brother stayed here. And she was here when she met my father in the late 30s.
Do you know how they met?
I do not. Dallas, I'm sure, was a very small Jewish population. And mother didn't like him at first. He wasn't, he didn't have enough get up and go for her. She had Stanley, my brother, who was, a young boy at the time. And she wanted a man who was going to take care of her. And he didn't seem like he had enough starch in him. So that didn't go anywhere until he started dating a woman she didn't like. And so she got back in the picture and they ended up getting married.
So obviously,
and then I came along.
Yeah, I was going to say you were born and raised here. So tell us a little bit about what you did as a child for fun. What was your neighborhood like? What did you do for amusement? And just a little bit about your experiences when you were young here.
Well, was raised in University Park, and I attended Bradfield when it was unair conditioned, and I was the only Jewish kid in the entire school until Ronnie Marks moved in the 4th grade. So I was not invited to any of the birthday parties. I did not, I was never invited home to play with any of the kids. I was just very solitary. When they had the students read the devotionals in the morning, I was never allowed to do that until the 6th grade. 6th graders did that, but where other people did true devotionals, I got to read a poem.
Yeah.
And so I rode my bike a lot. I rode my bike all over University and Highland Park. The great fun was to climb over the dividing fence onto, I don't know what tee it was, but it was the Dallas Country Club, and collect the tees from that tee box and then get out of there before you got caught.
Oh, great.
I was a tomboy.
Did you stay in that area in Highland Park throughout your schooling, throughout high school?
No, I left when I came home from camp in the 8th grade. We lived in another place. Mother sold my baby grand and my books, my childhood books, and we lived on Bandera, just near Northwest Highway in Hillcrest. And I went to Franklin when it was a 3-year junior high, and I graduated from Hillcrest when it was a 3-year high school.
Oh, okay. So what kind of activities did you do there when you switched to Franklin?
Well, I was in the orchestra. I was in the Latin club. I was in BBYO. What else did I do? I went to the movies. Loved always to go to the movies. Went to the skating rink, the Dubac skating rink that was on the curve where Presbyterian Hospital is now on Greenville. There was a sandy bottomed pool there, and it was wonderful. There was that and miniature golf right there, and the skating rink.
Okay. What kind of Jewish background would you say you had? And did your parents belong to a synagogue and any organizations when you were growing up?
So my grandfather was very progressive and my grandmother was not. She had 2 sinks. One of them was always kosher. I mean, her house was kosher. God forbid you should put something in the wrong place. My grandfather, on the other hand, mother told me, would come home and do everything my grandmother said. But on Sunday morning, he went down the street and had bacon and eggs at the corner place to eat. So mother grew up that way. And although she kept the most of the rules of being a secular Jew. So she kept the major holidays. We did not attend services regularly. I remember as a very young child, the one thing we really did do was go to the cemetery for Kever and we would, as a very young child, I stood near my father's grave.
Mhm.
And then we would go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, so they did not belong to a particular synagogue, are you saying?
I think we belonged to, I just don't remember. I don't remember as a very young child belonging to anything. I remember one time we went to Sherith Israel on way down on Park Row, because I remember going upstairs to where the women sat, and it was very dark and it was very quiet, and I had to be very, very quiet. But after that, we went to Temple Emmanuel on South Boulevard. Rabbi Klein scared me to death because he had bushy eyebrows, and he was a very dark man, and he had a 5 o'clock shadow at 9 in the morning. And we would meet every Sunday to have Sunday morning services. We did, the Friday service on Sunday, so we get used to it. And he would get up there and he'd dress in robes and he'd stand up there. And the way the lighting came down on his whole face was covered up with his eyebrows. So there's hardly a face there. And if anybody remembers Rabbi Klein, he was adorable and he was wonderful. But, until you got to know him, he was a pretty scary looking guy.
Right. Wonderful
so I do
memory.
It is a great memory. And I do remember Temple Emmanuel.
Okay.
And then I remember going to SMU while they built the new temple. And at that time, you used to go to the Village Theater and get on a bus and go to the synagogue. Excuse me, I am so sorry.
Okay.
Well, I apologize.
Okay.
I'm glad you can cut this out. And one day I got on the wrong bus and I got to the new Sheriff Israel. I remember walking in the building where the drop-off point was, and I smelled the paint. I can still smell it in my mind, and walked down that hallway between the place where they opened up for all the extra seats during the High Holy Days and the main sanctuary. And I happened to look through the doorway. The sun was shining behind the ark, and I felt this shiver go through me. And it was like, well, you know what? You really belong here. So when they called my mother to tell me I was at this other place, she said, do you want me to come get you? And I said, no, I think I'll stay here. And when I got back, I said, I think I want to change. And so we did. And so I went to 7th, 8th, 9th grade. I was confirmed there, sang in the choir under Al Turner. I was married there and confirmed and then married there. And it was not until we had children and I insisted that we had to belong somewhere, that my husband was more comfortable at Temple Emmanuel, that we went back there.
Okay. Very good. So the light shone and it was like, that's amazing.
It really was.
Yeah, that's quite something. Tell me a little bit about college and then what you did after that and what kind of work you did.
I always wanted to go to college. I never wanted to just graduate from high school, go to work. Although I started working at 13 in a dress factory in downtown Dallas in a sweatshop, actually.
Yeah.
But I went to college because I always wanted to be a teacher. But when I got to college, I was more interested in the degree than the learning. So by the time I finished college, I did what everybody else did in 4 years. It took me 5 years and 3 summers. And when I graduated, I had just gotten married. So I went to Washington, D.C., where my husband drove a car for the motor pool for the Department of the Army and at the Pentagon. And I ended up getting a job at the Pentagon as a nobody, like a typist, because nobody would give me a job as a college graduate with a husband in the service during Vietnam. And so I did that for a little over a year, but I got to work as, I got a promotion. I got another job there. When I came back to Dallas, I worked for the Department of, Corps of Engineers for a while. Then I worked at the Fort Worth National Bank. And then I worked at, a couple of other places. But I always wanted to teach. So I went back and got the few hours that I needed and started teaching at a special program in Fort Worth. And then I did a special program that was at Carswell Air Force Base. And then I did one at the ill-fated University of Plano with special needs adult kids going to college before they really did that sort of thing. And I fell in love with the idea of students who needed extra special guidance. I get something extra in the classroom. So I ended up going back and getting a master's in special education, where I stayed. I was at the Richardson School District for 23 years doing that.
Wonderful.
When I left there, I was at Brookhaven College. And then I finally finished, I retired last year from the Dallas Institute of Funeral Service, where students are taught to become funeral directors and embalmers.
Wow.
I taught English, college English writing.
Wow. Just before we go on, back up just a minute and tell us, how did you get back to Dallas? You just said when I was back in Dallas, but how come you decided?
After my husband got out of the service, he was employed by Sears. So we came back here.
Okay. Very good. Did both of you or either of you join any organizations when you were back here and get involved in anything?
Yes. We were in Fort Worth, and Ernest Cohen, I don't know if anybody will ever remember her name, but this was in Fort Worth. She tagged me to become a charter president for a B'nai B'rith night group in Fort Worth. So I started that with her guidance. And then I don't know what I did when I moved back here. I'm sure I did something. I've been connected with Jewish stuff always.
Mm-hmm. So how has your family grown?
We have 2 sons and 3 grandsons and 2 granddogs.
And where are they now, each of them?
The dogs are in Pennsylvania and the boys are in Maryland.
Maryland, okay. And what do they do?
The 3 little boys go to school. My sons, one works for the federal government. The other one is a veterinarian, obviously the one with the dogs.
Yeah, good, okay. Now, since you've been here a very long time, tell us about your feelings about how Dallas, the city of Dallas has changed, and then also the Dallas Jewish community, what it was like when you were younger, and what do you see it as being right now?
That's a difficult thing because, when you're in a place for a very long time, you don't really see the change unless you leave and come back. And I haven't done that.
Well, you left and came back at one point, though.
I know, but that's like 45 years ago.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Right. Right.
And since then, things have changed. I think the one thing I've seen is that the size of the city is so large that people can be isolated in various parts of the city with groups, but they are not necessarily engaged in the larger picture of the Jewish community, unless there's something that ends up tying them together. I started a special education Sunday program for the city with Judy Kogut in the 90s. And that drew people from all over the city. It ended up at the JCC with Laura Seymour. You couldn't ask for any better. But during the course of doing that, we pulled people in from all over the city. And so there was that kind of connection. But you know what I mean? It wasn't like, I don't know. I wasn't aware of BBYO very much because my boys were not active in it. So I don't know how it worked.
It's changed a lot too.
I imagine it has.
It has. Listen, since you lived in Fort Worth, I'm just curious, can you just briefly compare your life in Fort Worth versus when you came back to Dallas after that?
In my world, in my mind, Brett, who is the 50-year-old, was born in Fort Worth. And we lived in Fort Worth twice, each time for a couple of years, but really a long time ago. And the big difference for me was that Fort Worth was real and Dallas was sort of plastic. That was just the way I felt about it. I don't know if that has changed any because it's been so long since I lived in Fort Worth. But I would imagine with the growth and the population, again, that distance makes it difficult for people to live in the kinds of communities where you're 5 minutes away from everybody you want to hang out with. I just don't know. I think there's just a different dynamic in how you live here. I think we don't all live with Jewish friends that much anymore. I don't know about other people. I'm not sure we all go with Jewish doctors. You know, I just think there's a different way of living.
Are you involved at all in anything civically in the city itself other than Jewish activities?
When you say civically, you mean with?
I don't know, politics or neighborhood associations or, something other than Jewish activities.
I am part of my neighborhood association that does not require you to keep your grass a certain height. We are civically involved in the city of Garland, and we're one of the first neighborhoods to pull together and create a neighborhood association. So we are involved with our neighborhood, and we've run awards for the way we handle our politics, if you will.
Mm-hmm. Very good. How did you find that particular neighborhood to live in?
Fort Worth was not as expensive as Dallas when we moved, and we needed a place to live when we moved back. We had Brett, who was turning 4, and we knew we wanted another child, but we wanted to live in the Richardson School District because that was where we wanted to live. And Garland was less expensive than Richardson. Houses were going up $1,000 a month.
Wow.
A month.
Wow.
A month.
Mm-hmm. My goodness. Okay.
So the house that I bought for $27,500.
Yeah. Worth a fortune now, right?
It is worth I'm going to talk to them about taxes because it's, silly.
Yeah. Along the way, who would you say, if anybody, was your role model in life?
For anything or for being Jewish?
No, it's up to you. It could be both. It could be either one, whatever you think. Anybody that really stands out that you were trying to emulate or that you were very, very close with that, that really shaped things in your life. Anybody?
I think for being a human being, I had a professor during my graduate degree time, Ed Hammer, and he was very noteworthy in helping me develop into the person I wanted to become. And then a friend of mine named Bennett Miller opened my interest in that very type of civic activity you're talking about. We ended up co-teaching religious school at Temple Shalom back in the very infant days. I had, Jay was a baby and he didn't have the time to teach every week. So we taught opposite weeks, and that's how I got to meet him. Oh, he was very early on in revitalizing downtown.
I know the name.
And I got to know him pretty well. Interesting man.
Yeah, very good. Okay, now here's a really good one. what are you most, you can say your family, but I'd love it to be something other than, what are you most proud of?
For me personally,
Yeah, you have quite a few good accomplishments. What do you feel is the best thing you've done in your life so far?
well, I'll tell you, Toni Morrison said her children were her best things. And I have to tell you, that has to be it. But if it were anything else, it would be the fact that if you dig around where I have been, I have started a lot of things that other people have made into better things, and they have taken the credit for it. And I'm delighted for that.
Oh, that's very humble. You should get the
Well,
credit.
no, I don't. No, they made it. They made it. So they should get the credit for it, and I'm delighted.
Okay, that's wonderful.
Yeah.
Before we close, we've covered several different areas, but is there anything else you'd like to add about your family or about anything else, hobbies, anything that you're involved in or anything you'd like us to know about?
I love to quilt. I love to read. Um, I'm not finished. I may be retired, but I still have things that I can give. And watch me now.
That's fantastic. Thank you. I
Thank you very
appreciate it.
much for letting me say this.
Yes, absolutely. And I will see you Sunday.